Cultural appropriation is a lie. I'm going to give you 3 reasons why I think this. This is Noah Hovland with the Noah Hovland Show. Stay tuned. Okay, so to give a little pretext here, cultural appropriation has been in the news quite a bit these last couple weeks. It started out with this cute girl from Utah who wore a prom dress that was embroidered like a traditional Chinese dress that had like dragons and stuff on it. She wears this dress to her prom, posts the picture on Twitter, and all hell breaks loose. People were tweeting at her, you freaking, you jerk, my culture is not your prom dress, I think was like the main tweet. And then there's just this whole pile-on of Asian Americans who are all offended and mad, and non-Asian Americans who are offended for the Asian Americans, and just ridiculous pile-on. And so like the New York Times, I think it was, reached out to a cultural commentator in Hong Kong. So a Chinese person asked them, so what do you Chinese people think about this? Is this really that offensive to your culture? What's the deal here? And they were like, no, we don't care about that. Like, please wear the dress. You look great in the dress. Good for you. Way to like encourage Chinese culture. Thank you. Thanks for the plug. But anyways, apparently this is some giant crime by the standards of the social justice warrior. Another great example of cultural appropriation in recent weeks, this last week, Cinco de Mayo. Obviously, Cinco de Mayo is a great celebration of Mexico and liberation, and it's not really a Mexican holiday, though. It's mostly an American holiday about Mexico, which is pretty funny. I've been in Mexico on Cinco de Mayo, and they're like, well, what's that? What is this supposed to be? I don't know. So, but it's an American holiday where we wear sombreros and ponchos and eat tacos and celebrate Mexico. Drink too much tequila. It's a fun thing. Fun little gig. But of course, every year somebody gets all offended about it. Someone, I'm okay with like having tacos, but this just took it too far. There's always that guy. And then lastly, you have the Met Gala this last week, which is ridiculous. So it's all these, it's all this hobnobbery, these Hollywood elites and politicians and people coming together at the Met in New York City, and the theme was Catholicism. So they're wearing Catholic-themed dresses and costumes, and people had like crosses on their, robes, and it's like priest uniforms, and I think Rihanna dressed up as the Pope, which, again, I don't think a cultural appropriation is a thing, but if I think there is a time and place to say, hey, maybe you shouldn't wear that, it's when you have Rihanna, who has made her career as being a libidinous, promiscuous, kind of, definitely not someone who upholds the values of the Catholic Church or represents the Catholic Church in any way, ripping off wholesale Catholic imagery. And it's not just a cultural thing, that's like spiritual, that has spiritual meaning to lots of people, the cross and everything. So apparently it's offensive if a girl wears a cute Chinese dress, but if Rihanna wants to rip off the Pope, that's totally fine. And that's brings me to what these definitions really are, and you're gonna see how it's a strange definition. So I scoured the internet and I found this definition on Wikipedia. There wasn't like any good dictionary definitions or anything. It's not really a real thing, so Wikipedia was my best bet. It says cultural appropriation is a concept in sociology dealing with the adoption of the elements of a minority culture by members of a dominant culture. And see, there's the key. This is not about equality. This isn't a reasonable, like, measured, logical rule. This is something it's like a sliding scale depending on how, like, it's oppression plus culture plus stealing plus this equals cultural appropriation. But if the minority culture steals from the dominant culture, then it's not. But if And if the dominant culture, it's a mess. And the other definition I found, the further explanation of this on Wikipedia, was cultural appropriation is often portrayed as harmful in contemporary cultures and is claimed to be the violation of the collective intellectual property rights of the originating minority cultures, notably indigenous cultures and those living under colonial rule. So, just to get this straight, they're claiming that the cultural, and this isn't just Wikipedia, I found this in other places too, cultural appropriation is stealing of intellectual property rights from indigenous peoples. Now, this brings me to my first reason I think cultural appropriation is a lie, and that is intellectual property rights. So I had to study intellectual property when I was in school. And so when I read this, it struck me, that doesn't sound like intellectual property rights. And so I brushed up a little bit, did a little bit of research, and I found here's the legal definition of intellectual property. A work or invention that is the result of creativity, such as a manuscript or a design, to which one has the rights and for which one may apply for a patent, copyright, trademark, etc. So, intellectual property is a proper legal term that means you can apply copyright or trademark or patent to your idea, to this thing that you've come up with, whether that be an invention, a song, a dance, an idea, any of it. And so in music, that means that you both have to have a medium by which your song is captured, right? You have to have it recorded or written down, and you also, it has to be a substantial invention, right? If I can't copyright, like I didn't come up with that. That's been used a million times and it's not substantial. Even if I come up with something completely new, that might be brand new. Maybe no one's ever played that in the world, but it's not substantial. It's not that interesting, and doesn't constitute copyright because it's not a substantial idea. And I know this is a gray area, but I'm most certain that intellectual property does not apply to cultural ideas and creations. For example, let's take the sombrero, right? Some people claim that wearing a sombrero is called cultural appropriation. Are we going to pretend that Mexico was the first country to invent brimmed hats? Like, I got a little news flash for you guys, but every culture ever in the world has some kind of brimmed hat. It's a very useful tool in keeping out the sun, protecting your eyes, protecting your face, keeping the rain off of you. Brimmed hats are everywhere. You got cowboy hats, you got the old hunting hats from like Eastern Europe, you got the old beaver bill kind of hats. Everyone's got brimmed hats. So basically you're claiming copyright on changing the ratio a little bit, like, well, here it's not as much like keeping stuff out of your face, it's more about the sun, so let's just take down the height and make it a little wider. Like, you can't claim copyright for a little tweak you made. Maybe if you design a specific sombrero that like fits you a certain way and has embroidering or something. But the idea of a sombrero overall, I'm sorry, you didn't invent that. The whole premise is flawed. If you're going to claim that it's the violation of property, intellectual property rights, that's a flawed idea. Now, my second problem with the idea of cultural appropriation is it is impossible to quantify. It is impossible to quantify. You ask someone, so is it cultural appropriation if on Cinco de Mayo I have a taco? They say, oh no man, it's good, you can have a taco. And you say, okay man, so what if I wear a sombrero? How about that? No man, it's good, you can wear a sombrero. So long as it's not too big, you gotta like, if you can fit it through the door, it's not offensive, it's good. Okay, so I can wear a sombrero, I can eat tacos. What if, get this, what if I wear a sombrero while eating a taco? Oh no man, that's not okay. That's appropriation right there. Sombrero plus taco, appropriation. So see, and the standard is so unequally applied across the spectrum. You know, it's appropriation if I use African American slang, But if I want to make a rap song, that's totally fine. If Eminem wants to record rap records and be hailed as one of the best rappers ever, that's totally cool. Apparently that's not appropriation, but it is if I say like not the N-word. That's like a slur, but there's plenty of like African American slang that I've heard people say, no, you're not allowed to use that as a white person. That's appropriation. And that's ridiculous. Not only is it ridiculous, it's also super damaging and degrading to our discourse and our culture in the United States of America today. If we truly want an equal society, if we want equality, fairness, and people to be perceived without prejudice, then we have to stop drawing arbitrary lines between each other and then making rules based on those lines we've drawn. That is, in fact, the definition of discrimination. Discrimination, let me just Google it right here to prove to you that I'm not lying to you. Discrimination. The unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people or things, especially on the grounds of race, age, or sex. So, notice, this is a real definition. It doesn't have anything to do with majority, minority, dominant, not dominant. It's not a victim thing. The fact is, if you say because you're Mexican, you can eat sombreros, you can wear sombreros and eat tacos and a poncho, but since I'm American, I can't, that's discrimination. And I'm not trying to play the victim here. I'm not trying to say that America's flipped on its head, and I'm not trying to downplay the horrible discrimination that has happened in this country, and that's horrible stuff that's gone down. And I'm not trying to draw an equivalency, but what I am trying to point out is that it's similar thinking. It's the similar ideas here that are the problem, because bad ideas only get worse. And so if we have this bad idea that somehow I'm not allowed to wear a sombrero and a poncho because that's cultural appropriation, that's just setting up dumb rules. Unlike, I was listening to a podcast once, and they were talking to this Latin American dude and about cultural appropriation, and he was like, yeah, I think if a white American wants to start a Mexican restaurant, that's cultural appropriation. What? So if Bill Nelson wants to start, Bill can't start Bill's taco truck, you're going to crush Bill Nelson's dreams just because it seems tiny bit offensive? To me, that's ridiculous. It's discriminatory at its foundation, and it draws people apart. It drives people away from each other. It draws arbitrary distinctions, creates rules based on those distinctions, and drives us away from each other. Instead of saying, hey, let's let our cultures kind of come together and understand each other, and you can have a little bit of this. Like, I'm Swedish, right? You can have some Swedish pancakes. I'll make some tacos. We can, we'll blend this whole thing up. Instead, they have this multicultural idea where we're all going to just be in the same place but separate. And it's ridiculous and not useful. And it hasn't ever worked. And the third thing that bothers me about cultural appropriation is it's victimless. Who is hurt by Bill Nelson starting Bill's taco truck? There's no damage done. Maybe he'll take away a little bit of business from the Mexican-run taco truck, but only if his tacos are better. So that's just the free market. That has nothing to do with the color of your skin or your race or your age or your gender or any of it. That just has to do with the free market. The only victim of cultural appropriation is, say, I went to Africa and saw some cool tribal dance that people were doing, and then I come back and put that exact dance step into like a music video or something, right? So I verbatim steal someone's idea and put that in a music video. Yeah, maybe that's cultural appropriation, but it's also illegal and super shitty to do. It's not a cool thing regardless. It's not about race or gender or color or skin or none of that. That's just a stupid thing to do. That's just not cool. That's just stealing from somebody or a group of people. It's not about victims or not victims or dominant or not dominant. It's just not cool to do. So I hope I've illustrated that cultural appropriation isn't real. You shouldn't steal people's ideas. And you shouldn't do things that are overtly offensive for no reason. But this whole touchy-feely cultural appropriation idea isn't real. And it's damaging our discourse and our understanding of one another here in the great United States of America. Stay strong, my friends. Have a great week.